Hello everybody, welcome to Fireside Reading with Papi. I've got a little friend with me today, listening to me reading. That's Maggie. That's my daughter's dog. She's been waiting for another story to be read to her. So this one is dedicated to Maggie.
You don't know her, you just follow her, right?
The name of this story is Curious George Goes to a Costume Party. I'm sure many of you know who Curious George is. He's a little monkey that's always getting into trouble. His curiosity. This is George. He was a good little monkey and always very serious. One day, George and his friend, the man with the yellow hat, went on their way to a party at Mrs. Gray's house. There's George and the man with the yellow hat on the way to Mrs. Gray's. George could not wait. He liked parties, and he was looking forward to seeing Mrs. Gray. But when the door opened, George did not see Mrs. Gray at all. He saw a witch. What kind of party is this with a witch at it? Don't be afraid, George, said the man with the yellow hat. This witch is our friend. The witch took off her mask. It was Mrs. Gray after all. Oh dear, she said. Did I forget to tell you that this was a costume party? The witch is really Mrs. Gray dressed up as a witch. George had never been to a costume party before. Inside, he saw more people than he knew. They were all wearing costumes. There was his friend Betsy, dressed up like an astronaut. And was that Bill? Why, he looked just like a mummy, all wrapped up in cloth. George wanted to wear a costume too. I have some dress-up clothes upstairs, said Mrs. Gray. Would you like to use them to make a costume, George? Mrs. Gray took George to a room with a big trunk filled with clothes. Borrow anything you like, George, she said. I have just the thing for your friend downstairs. Here's a big box of play clothes. George tried on lots of costumes. The first was too big. The next was too small. Another was too silly, and this one was too scary. Ooh, looks like he's dressed up in Frankenstein. That's scary. At last, George found a costume that was just right. George was a rodeo cowboy. He wore a vest and pants with fringe. He even had a lasso and a hat. Cowboy George. If only he could see himself in the mirror. George was curious. Could he see himself if he stood on the bed? No, he needed to jump higher. George bounced on the bed just a little, but still he couldn't see himself in the mirror. He bounced a little more, and then a little more. Soon George was having so much fun, he forgot all about looking in the mirror. He bounced as high as he could. Uh-oh, here goes George, getting into trouble. I can see it coming.
Huh?
Crash! George bounced off the bed. He smashed into the night table, and he got tangled up in the tablecloth. Suddenly, everything went dark. George heard the people downstairs gasp. What was that? Was that a ghost? A ghost? George did not want to meet up with a ghost all alone. He dashed out of the room and down the hall. He wanted to get back to his friend in a hurry, and he knew the fastest way. He hopped onto the stair rail and he sailed whoosh down the stairs. It's a ghost, somebody screamed. Everyone turned. They looked scared and they were looking at George. The ghost must be right behind him. There's George sliding down the stairs. Everybody's watching. George flew off the rail and landed, plop, in the arms of a farmer. But this wasn't really a farmer. It was a friend, the man with the yellow hat. Soon, everybody stopped looking scared and started to laugh. That's not a ghost. That's a cowboy, laughed a policeman. That's not a cowboy. That's a monkey, giggled the princess. That's not a monkey, said Betsy. It's Curious George. Everyone clapped and cheered. They liked George's Halloween trick. You gave us a good scare, George, said Mrs. Gray, and I'm glad to see you found some interesting costumes. Now, why don't I take your ghost outfit so you can join the party? After the guests bobbled for apples, lit jack-o'-lanterns, and played some party games, prizes for the best costume were handed out. They're going to hand out prizes for the best costume. I wonder who's going to win the prizes. There was one prize for Betsy and one for Bill, and two for Curious George. George is going to get two prizes. You were the best ghost and the best cowboy, George, said Mrs. Gray. Everyone had a good time at the party, especially George. Too soon, it was time to say goodbye. Good night, George. Happy Halloween, Mrs. Gray said. Good night, said George, and the man with the yellow hat. Well, that was a great story. I love Curious George. I hope you do too, and I hope you enjoyed the story. Until next time, stay safe. Bye now.